we set up the conditions to be able to witness and discern between these aspects of ourselves, these layers of conditioning and nurturing or trauma or adaptations to our difficult circumstances that cover up this part of us that is bound up in this very small world of our sense of our limitations and powerlessness and hopelessness and all the ways that I hate myself, I'm like this, I don't like myself, this is makes me so fucking angry, all these kinds of things, right? And when we start to have that discernment and we see, oh, here's my conditioning and here's why it exists. And a lot of times people do this work in therapy. We're not in therapy. We don't need to talk too much about it. We need to understand where our suffering comes from. So the first 2, 3, 4 weeks is maybe doing some of that reflection, and we do it in a meditative way. So you're not thinking and telling me a story. We're letting your subconscious participate in revealing the mystery of the mechanism of your suffering. You see? Once we start to see this mystery more clearly, that, oh, that conditioned me to feel worthless, and therefore I always go beyond my boundaries to please people. That conditioned me to make me feel dumb, so I go beyond myself and keep myself awake in the night, checking my work 1,000 times, and feel anxious even though I'm really smart, you know? And so we start to see that the limitations are more to do with our conditioning and are a delusion when it's relative to who we really are. We also see the part of us that suffers from these delusions, the pain that it causes to compromise our boundaries, to insult ourselves, to abandon ourselves, to hate ourselves. And usually we'll see this very helpless, hopeless, broken part of ourselves. And when we see that, there is some amount of grief that comes up, pain that comes up. Maybe some anger comes up towards the circumstances. But the most important thing that comes up is a loving compassion, a desire to rescue this part of ourselves, to care for this part of ourselves, to protect this part of ourselves, and almost like a sense of, a mother-like protectiveness about this part of ourselves. And that's what we leverage to get into our emotional growth and spiritual development work. When we start to feel more loving compassion and understand that we suffer from self-diminishment or suffer from undermining ourselves, we start to actually create a shield from our own behaviors and our own tendencies that undermines our well-being. And when we create that shield, which is by taking action, which is by setting the boundaries or creating the circumstances for better outcomes for what has more purpose and more meaning to you, then the subconscious starts to trust you as the person in the position of power, rather than feeling like the world is in control of myself. The world is in control of my reality. This is the beginning of freedom, right? From this place where we start to feel our loving and compassionate towards ourselves and feel more loyalty and feel more zeal to protect and care for ourselves, there is a softening of the mind, and there is also kind of a vigorousness or sharpness that comes online, and that softening of the mind in this very loving way, and at the same time the fierceness of the mind in this very passionate way, is what we then leverage to move into and make spiritual and emotional progress. Emotional and spiritual progress then is very much, born by using two important levers or two important conditions of our consciousness. We are people who seek purpose, and we are people who make meaning. And we use these two tools, seeking purpose and making meaning, as a way to help guide our progress in our spiritual and emotional growth. And so most of people that I see are struggling with themselves or the world around them, or they're struggling with the sense of having a meaningful and purposeful life. And even that is often relating to how they see themselves and how they're taught to experience and see themselves, right? And so the first step is always using the process of cultivating inner awareness in discerning between what are the filters I've been taught to see myself with, or what are the experiences that shaped my filters, whether it is the people or the circumstances of my life or the traumas of my life, whatever that might be. And the way we go about doing that is, we'll pretty much right away start doing internalizing meditation. One of my favorite one is a grounding breath work, a simple breath work where you breathe in and your attention flows in with the inhalation from the crown into the root of your spine. So this can be the sacrum or the perineum. And as you exhale, your attention flows down to your feet. And you just have people do this breath work, breathing in, crown to the root, and exhaling down to their feet. Repeating this breath work, they're guided to stay very soft in their awareness. Often people become less performative and more meditative in their responses. And what happens is, instead of them trying to remember and think about what responses they want to give me, their subconscious responds as if in a dream. Some random memory comes up, or something they think about that's bothering them that they weren't planning on talking about. They start to feel a sensation in their body that then can reveal that they've been holding on to this tension for such a long time. And it's like we start to have a conversation with your subconscious. And the subconscious is this layer of kind of covering, or you can say like a filter to your natural light, that is the filter that has been shaped by your life experiences. And the subconscious naturally wants to be, cleaned up. It doesn't want to continue suffering. This is at least what I've experienced in my practice, that people naturally, without intention, bring up the things that they themselves are surprised with. And most often, when they're surprised, they're the most meaningful, important things that are coming up without them planning or thinking about it. So one experience they start to have right away is that their mind and their thinking capacity is not really helpful in their decision making or their personal progress and growth. And so they become more inclined and welcoming of this opportunity to deeply listen to what is being said within themselves before they're having a reaction or while they're having a reaction. So if you're sitting there listening to this video, you can start doing breathing crown to the root and down to your feet, and use that as a device to really pay attention to the words I say and also what comes up in response to my words. Where does your mind go? And just make note of where your mind goes and then come back to what you're listening here. And what you're being shown is how your subconscious is responding to my words, and more so showing what needs to heal in response to what I'm offering as a therapy or therapeutic words in this case. And so that is kind of the beginning step of the work, where people have to start to experience themselves as something other than their subconscious in their mind, but rather experience themselves as something that is actually free and spontaneous in their expression. Through this spontaneous expression, what comes up is all the ways they suffer and how that is separate from the part of themselves that is suffering. All the ways they suffer has more to do what their life has been and what has been their past. And the part of themselves that's suffering is the one that's imprisoned in their stuck mentality or their stuck emotional experience or the stagnant spiritual experience that they're having. And so that initial discernment of like, here's how my subconscious, my mind functions, and here's the part of me that is suffering from it, is the very first step of starting to then notice that, like, oh, all these things I hate about myself are not really myself. I am this suffering from all of these overlying conditioning or overlying covers that block me from myself. But where, another thing that happens in these meditations, sometimes in the first visit, sometimes in the first few visits, is when they can relate to that part of themselves that's suffering. There's a spontaneous feeling of grief, compassion, love that comes through. At first, the work is to arrive at this place where you feel this deep, loving compassion towards the part of you that suffers from all of the conditioning of your mind, conditioning of your belief systems, and conditioning of your sense of purpose in a way that undermines who you are and what you would really like. When we have that loving compassion, we naturally tend to create a space within ourselves to say, wow, how I've been living, it doesn't really resonate with who I really am. So what is my purpose? What am I here to do? And, you know, a lot of times people will feel really lost in this place. Often, actually, if people have had a lot of therapy, they come to see me in this place, where they have had a lot of therapy and they know, oh, the cause of my suffering is this past, and my dad made me feel like this, or this trauma made me turn me into that. And then they have a lot of loving compassion towards themselves, that like, oh, I should take it easy on myself, or oh, I shouldn't say negative things, I shouldn't criticize myself so much. But they haven't really made much progress in actually doing those things. And so the devices of what what our sense of purpose and also how we make meaning is what we use in Ayurvedic psychology to really get to know ourselves. You see, what's happened is your original self has been covered up, has been lost to you, lost to your awareness for 15, 20, 50 years, sometimes. And here we are 5, 6 weeks into our work and starting to see this part. It's like, wow, I don't remember this part of me since I was 10 years old, right? So then we start a relationship with this part of ourselves. The daily work becomes about what is most meaningful to me, right? What is most meaningful to this part of me, right? And if as I'm a parent, right? My children can't really tell me what's most meaningful to them, but it is my job to pay attention to their nature, their tendency, their likes and dislikes, understand what they're struggling with through cultivating empathy within myself. And the more clearly I understand, what they're seeking, I can respond with that thing. And you see their spirits get lifted. when they're seen, they're heard, or they feel like, some unconscious need that they couldn't speak was met. Same happens within us. When we start to pay attention to our part of us that has been lost to us, has been suffering emotionally because it's been covered up with the layers of our self-limiting belief and our trauma, when we start to really say, what's more meaningful to you? What's the most meaningful choice? What would be the most meaningful thing to do with this situation in this relationship? Or what is the most meaningful thing for me, for my heart? What is most true for me in terms of, what I could eat today, or how I could play today, or I could nourish myself today? What you're starting to do is starting to build more trust with this deepest part of yourself, this original part of yourself. And it's a relationship between this awareness that you're cultivating and the self that you're trying to raise within yourself, right? And you are the one witnessing, you are the one taking care of and doing, you are the one receiving. And so you become this internal triad, or a therapeutic team within yourself, right? I am the parent, I am the child, and I am the therapist, really paying attention to what is the need in this relationship for this relationship to grow. The question of what is most meaningful is a question to rewire our brain. It is a rewire our brain from saying, what is the meaning of what's outside of me, to how I make meaning within myself. Rather than seeing what would be most meaningful to the people around me, to what would be most meaningful to me and my role in this situation, right? And so you're reorienting your brain almost in an opposite way to how you're conditioned. And you're becoming, through that process, more centered in yourself. Some people might say you become self-centered, but if you have humility and you feel that sense of, love and compassion for the part of you that suffers, and from that you feel empathy for others who suffer in the same way, you'll see you actually become centered in yourself and not self-centered. Once you begin to become really good at, and consistent at asking yourself what is most meaningful and following through on doing the meaningful things, then another mystery gets revealed to you. What I'm good at, what I like to do. And it's almost like you're starting to see the sky more clearly, this purpose that we are wondering about. What is my purpose? Your personal purpose in Ayurveda, again, Ayurveda is about individualization and individualized genius. And so your sense of meaning is where your sense of purpose grows from. So you doing what is most meaningful to you is usually complementary to your most meaningful skills and your most meaningful desires. And in turn, as you continue to do those meaningful things, you start to just subconsciously, unconsciously, in some mysterious way, start to get a sense of like, if I had a sense of purpose, it would be this. This feels so much more purposeful for me that I can, it's purposeful for me to get up at 5 in the morning and do my meditation because I have much better days. I feel my sense of purpose is make a happy little world for my child, even though the world is suffering outside. It's almost like you can pour yourself into this little world and be happy rather than always looking outside and feeling like you would be suffering all of your life. And so you discover your purpose by using this device that is what is most meaningful to me.